We'll get started in just a moment. And this week's mural is a little different. This mural is actually from Washington, D.C. So I was in Washington, D.C. this past weekend, or earlier this week. It's all a big blur. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as far as that's concerned. But this mural is, of course, Washington, and it's on one of the many murals in downtown DC. This one on the side of a brick building. So I thought that was actually a very good use of space. It's kind of on the second story, so it's not going to be tagged, but it's also pretty iconic. And there's a lot of good murals in DC that and pretty much almost every city, it seems like, has a lot of good murals. And as I travel around the US, as I travel around the world, that's one of the big things that I really enjoy is seeing the different art that people have done, and kind of, it does represent a city. It actually makes things very interesting from that standpoint. Just kind of seeing the different art that people kind of fit into the general environment that they're in, much like the utility box program that we have going on right now. If you have any questions, go ahead and add them to the chat, and we'll go ahead and get to them a little bit later, hopefully. Let's see. Paused for just a moment, and then we'll get started. Everything looks good. Okay. So let's go ahead and get rid of the Washington mural for those that have had a chance to see it. And let's move back to our standard setup, and let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein. Thanks for joining me again this week. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Happy Holy to those that are celebrating. And I've already been to several celebrations. It is a very festive time of the year, as we get into all those spring celebrations for a lot of different cultures, a lot of different traditions. This is the 105th installment of my weekly office hours. This is the 2-year anniversary of my first live stream address on March 20th, 2020. So on the first day of spring, and spring is coming up this weekend. We've now reached 732 days since the March 16, 2020 county health order started the shelter in place in an attempt to slow the spread of COVID-19. 2 years ago, I converted my weekly coffee shop hours, office hours, into these weekly live stream addresses. I haven't missed a week since, pretty much almost every week from standing in this office. And, people continue to say they enjoy hearing from their mayor each week, whether or not they watch this live stream address live or delayed and watch it sometimes later in the week. It's been really good because it's allowed me to, take stock of the last 2 weeks or so, update you on what's happening on the news, answer some of your questions, and just give you some general words of encouragement. thanks for allowing me to continue to represent you and work for Sunnyvale during an ever-changing time as far as that's concerned. And, I've really, in the last week, taken stock over the last 2 years. It's definitely been an interesting 2 years. I actually went back and watched my original live stream address, so the first live stream address that I did. And, we've learned a lot over the last 2 years. It's pretty amazing how resilient people are. And, we've learned how to do remote meetings and remote learning. But, just from this general live stream address, from my standpoint, figuring out the best platform to kind of transmit this, from dealing with poor lighting to, a bad camera angle. All of us have had those sorts of issues, bad audio. Definitely, we've had our ups and downs. We've had some technical difficulties either with Facebook or just the general internet in my community, in my neighborhood. But in general, the live stream has really worked well to get the word out, to provide you some updates and just kind of build that community. I've definitely seen, a lot of positive comments as far as that's concerned, through the 2 years. It's amazing to see 2 years has gone with a lot of it spent inside. Yeah, that very first address was talking, basically telling people this is, giving people ideas on how to spend your time inside. It's like, it is kind of interesting from that standpoint, looking back. And, that a first declaration was only supposed to go to April 7th, 2020. So, it is kind of interesting. It's like, yeah, we think we'll be out of it in a few weeks. And here we are 2 years later and still kind of dealing with the lingering effects. From a Sunnyvale standpoint, we, had already declared that state of emergency. And, we're looking at funding Sunnyvale Community Services for assistance. After that, we moved on to the Sunnyvale Cares program for, giving $5,000 to $15,000 grants to our residents or to our businesses. And then, just providing general assistance to those in need in our community. So we switched city staff to answer telephones, make phone calls directly to seniors that are sheltering in place to see if they needed medication, if they needed food, and actually delivering that from a city standpoint, which is kind of all hands on deck to do whatever you can to help out your residents. We closed city facilities. We did, close our playgrounds and our dog parks, mainly because, it was seen as, okay, contact transmission was critical. And so, having playgrounds open where kids could spread COVID was a big possibility, and so it was a difficult time for many. We all learned about safe social distancing, cleaning surfaces for the longest time, washing our hands, wearing masks, and just pulling together to do whatever we can to help out. I've delivered masks and delivered toilet paper and, heard from a lot of residents and trying to figure out what to do next. But one message really rung true in my mind, and that was part of that very first address is being generous and be kind. And I really think that from a Sunnyvale standpoint, we have fantastic residents who were very generous and were very kind. We had to learn to be patient, and all of that was kind of the heart of the community. Definitely, I saw groups forming to collect food, to do to help people with medication and picking it up and delivering it, to doing blankets and coat drives. It was really it's really touching to see how well our community has really pulled together over the last 2 years, especially, and stepping up to help all those in need. So, I was I went back and, and watching that first address, it's looking for ways to pass the time that people were interested in, and telling people not to be focused on the news. The news is important, but, to some degree, even today, you see that it's all basically, highlights and, very stressful from a large standpoint for those people that are out watching the news, staying up to date, but not watching, giving the news, collecting the news in kind of small pieces, focusing only on the biggest headlines. That's one way to not focus on the mania that it can be the news in our modern society. From my standpoint, I heard from a lot of people who are doing different things to pass their time over the last 2 years and sheltering in place. For me, I spent a lot of time just being mayor, preparing for these live stream addresses, watching, tons of, addresses from the governor, from county health, from the president, responding to issues, keeping up to date on everything that's happening, because it was changing dramatically, continuously. But from my standpoint, it's been a good 2 years. I've been have a lot more people that follow my mayor's restaurant project to support our restaurants and get people to shop local. So many people eat at the same 10 to 15 restaurants, and here's showing them the variety of our city and city's restaurants, and kind of how that reflects the diversity of our residents. So from that standpoint, it has been good. And in my daily run with our dog, running 2 to 5 miles every morning. I've never been a streak runner, but COVID has kind of converted me into that, being out there every day to see what's happening in the city, and what the weather's like, and it's been good from that standpoint. But we've made it through. We're not out of the woods completely, whatever this new normal is going to look like. But it's getting vaccines to everyone. It's making sure that people can get tested. It's making sure that people understand that if they're in an unsafe situation, wearing a mask is one of the best things you can do. I still see that, even though that's not required inside of stores, grocery stores, and department stores. Definitely, I see that is the way of the world. People, and I think that's a safe thing for people to do at this point. But I'll stop these live stream addresses at some point. I'm still, I still think that they're valuable. They're valuable for me to answer questions that a lot of people have. And so, in making it easy for people to kind of skip through to either the questions or finding out what's happening, what's upcoming in our city, I think that's really good. And then you just find out some of the decisions that council's made, getting that word out of what people, what's happening at a council. Nobody, a lot of people don't have time to sit through hours of council meetings or just kind of track down what's been happening. But I do think that it's valuable from that standpoint. So at some point I'll be doing these, maybe once a month or something of that nature. But I still am doing my in-person office hours on Being Seen. So either way, this live stream address is kind of an addition to help get the word out, answer your questions, and those live stream addresses are good. But people really appreciate meeting in person, asking their questions, getting an immediate response, and then asking follow-ups. So I still, I've been doing in-person meetings now for a while at Being Seen on Murphy Avenue, starting around 9:15 and going to 11:30, noon, 1 p.m., depending upon how many people really need to speak, how busy my day is. But, I still enjoy getting the word out as far as what's happening from a Sunnyvale standpoint, and providing you critical information as the world continues to change. About 6 months ago, actually over 6 months ago, I started changing my background art every week from art provided by Sunnyvale artists from the Sunnyvale Art Club. Today's piece is by Gheta Taneja. And I thought it was perfect for, the holy festival that's going on from the Indian community, but it's kind of a celebration to a certain degree of our two-year struggle to get through COVID, and happy to have been here for our residents and doing whatever I can to make sure that Sunnyvale basically thrives, survives and thrives as we recover and as we deal with that ever-changing requirements of the pandemic. Let's go ahead and get started and talk about a little bit about what's happened at the federal, state, county, and city level over the last 2 weeks. Last Monday, council had a very long evening. Basically, it was not a normal council meeting, but on the Moffett Park specific plan outreach. And specifically, this was focused on open space and ecology. And, it was a discussion on a lot of different things, but where the green space would go, and a lot of the decisions and kind of the direction on pulling all the different stakeholders together and coming up with a general idea of creating a green belt through the center of Moffett Park that would go from basically Baylands to Matilda and a little bit farther, and looking at where we could have active fields for conceivably school next to a possible school in Moffett Park, but also just for people to have different sports in Moffett Park. And so it was a good discussion. It was a presentation followed by resident questions and comments, and then direction from council. So overall, I think it was really good. There were some issues that we still need to resolve. I think one of the biggest issues is making sure that there's an appropriate tree canopy out there. It's not just open space. And I think that's one of the big issues about like the JW Christian Greenbelt is, there's certain trees there, but it's basically one long field of grass, which, and trail, which is good, but I do think that providing a certain amount of shade and making sure that you deal with and with the sun and how, basically creating those hot areas down in that area. So grass will help, but actually creating a good number of trees in the green areas, as well as just kind of along the streets, I think will make Moffett Park that much better. If you want to give feedback, if you want to see what that video and that presentation is, you can go to Moffett Park, MOFFETT, parksp.com, and you can get more information. And we're already planning our next event, which will happen sometime in April, and that will be on land use. And so that's one of the biggest, that's one of the big questions as far as, where office space will go, so we're looking conceivably at an additional 10 million square feet of office space, where retail will go, so 500,000 square feet of retail. And then, of course, most importantly, up to 20,000 units of residential. And so we're figuring out the right locations for those, and what's been discussed, what some initial evaluations are from staff is concerned. So I do think that that's actually very good, and figuring out what Moffett Park looks like in the long term. We're doing the specific plan to say, this is where Moffett Park might be in 10, 20, 30 years. So, this is the creating an ongoing vision, a long-term vision of what you would like to see there. And, definitely if you go to that website, moffettparksp.com, you can sign up and get notified when the next outreach meetings are going to happen. And then last Tuesday evening, Governor Newsom gave his State of the State address, and it was really short. It's only 18 minutes long. For normally in the past, it's been a lot longer, and he spent a lot of time talking about the unfolding war in Ukraine, of course, and anxiety over spiraling gas prices were all part of the speech. There was a lot of discussion on COVID, but And, in January, he basically the governor called for a pause to the annual increase in the state gas tax scheduled for July. And there will be a quick update on like what the proposal was for this week, from some of the state legislators, but no details were provided in the governor's speech. But there was a lot of discussion, but not a big plan for he didn't really lay out big proposals from that standpoint. I think he'd already released a preliminary budget, and I think they're continuing to work on that budget, and that kind of lays out a lot of those programs. So we'll see how that process continues to evolve. Last Saturday was the kickoff to the Sunnyvale National League. So the Little League at Washington Park, and it was great to see some parents, see the youth out there enjoying themselves, and that was both T-ball and Little League. And so it was great, to be out there with the kids, and the chief threw out the first pitch, and so it was actually good and we actually had the fire engine there too. So it was great for the kids. Especially after a difficult 2 years. Last year's season was cut very short, so it was a shortened season because of COVID, and it was good to see everybody out there enjoying themselves and on a beautiful day here in Sunnyvale. And then last Sunday was, of course, daylight savings time. We sprung forward and lost an hour of sleep, and I was actually on a red eye Saturday night to Washington, D.C. For the National League of Cities. So, and this was, one of the things that you do is on city council is go out and advocate for your city, go to these conferences, and especially the one in D.C. to meet different federal departments, as well as some of our, the staff and some of our federal leaders from a state level that go there. And so, it was good, that, I spent the good part of the week advocating for Sunnyvale and DC. I got to meet, Senator Padilla and his DC staff. I met Congressman Khanna and his staff, and talked about, different things that we can get additional funding for Sunnyvale, different things that I would like, them to look at a federal level, changes. And so it was good from that standpoint. And then I also got to meet some representatives from certain departments, so Department of Transportation, the FAA, and just the conference itself is really good because it talks about, some of the best practices. It's good to get ideas and learn about possible funding sources that different cities have used in order to get things done. Generally it was good weather. I didn't have any chance to visit any of the museums like I normally do. When I go to DC, I did get to spend an hour or two on the mall and saw several monuments. Went for a run, Sunday afternoon, but Monday I didn't even leave the hotel. And finally Tuesday I was visiting. The conference ended, but then getting to visit, Congressman, the Capitol, and the Congressman Khanna's office and Senator Padilla's office on Wednesday. But it was actually a very productive event, and hopefully some of the things that I learned, as well as some of the possible grant opportunities that are there, will come to fruition, and it'll actually be even more, it'll even be better for the city at the end of the day. And then on Tuesday, and actually on that Monday, there was actually the senators pushed forward a bill to looking at ending daylight savings time. So the whole concept of springing forward and falling back, which was kind of interesting, talking to Senator Padilla, basically the day after that had been approved, or at least had been approved to kind of move forward. So we'll see what happens as far as that's concerned. But, from a state standpoint, we approved something about 2 years ago now. We're coming up on 2 years, and happy to see that it might actually be ended. So daylight savings time is causes a lot more accidents and everything as we deal with those time changes every year. And, from a California standpoint, we did pass that bill, and it just kind of languished because it requires federal approval. And so finally something might actually happen, which is kind of interesting. And then on Tuesday, the city had the first of several meetings to discuss the community center grounds. So the grounds at the Sunnyvale Community Center, there's a big pond, and there's been, ongoing question about how to best utilize that land. And so, this was the first virtual meeting to collect information. There's actually an online survey that you can fill out, but, updates include, what to do with the pond, whether or not to decrease it a little bit, adding walkways, doing additional landscaping, trees, open space, whether or not there needs to be a field there for kids to play, and a general playground. So lots of ideas. Of course, I was in DC, and that meeting was a little late for me to also attend, but haven't had a chance to get back and watch that meeting yet, but I'll get there. But yeah, if you want to give your input and also sign up to see future meetings, you can go to, and I posted about it earlier this week, so you can actually look at one of the previous posts, but you can go and attend the community center grounds, search for community center, and you'll see that outreach on the city website. And then Wednesday, there was the city's sustainability speaker series. This one was the emissions that you purchase, reducing your carbon footprint. And so this was basically Chris Jones, director at Cool Climate Network, basically talked about how your everyday choices can create or reduce your carbon emissions. So, and this is one of the things that we have 3 or 4 times a year. We have sustainability speakers come to Sunnyvale. We're still doing virtual, so it's a little bit easier, but at some point we'll be going back to hybrid. But speaking to us and educating our residents on things that they can do to be greener, to be more sustainable in their everyday lives. And so a lot of that is great education. And then on Wednesday of this week, state legislators proposed a $400 rebate for taxpayers. And so this $400 amount per taxpayer was calculated to kind of cover the annual gas tax of 51.1 cents gallon to fill up a 15-gallon tank once a week for a year. So that's how they kind of came up with that number. So that proposal's now went to, is now out there, and it's basically in negotiations with Governor Newsom, trying to figure out the best way to deal with the issues as far as how high the gasoline has gotten. And then also there's some ongoing questions about why California's gas prices are just so high. And so definitely we'll see how that goes in the next few weeks. I'm sure you'll hear more of that, because as much as they started to go down a little bit, the gas prices are still very high. Yesterday, of course, was St. Patrick's Day. There was lots of music and lots of activity on Murphy Avenue. I had my annual corned beef sandwich and fries and a glass of Guinness on Murphy Avenue. And, this is definitely at some point, I'm hoping that we'll have a normal celebration. There was outdoor music, and we had a few live bands, but it was a little tamer than it had been in, pre-COVID as far as that's concerned. But it was great to see so many people out there yesterday for lunch. Lots of camaraderie, and a lot of people, just out there enjoying, St. Patrick's Day, whether or not they're Irish or not. But it was good from that standpoint to just be downtown on a beautiful day, and people enjoying the outside, sitting outside. I think that was the biggest thing I heard from multiple residents of, like, let's, whatever we can do to keep, Murphy Avenue closed would be fantastic. Let's go ahead and get to our weekly COVID numbers. COVID has dropped dramatically over the last few weeks. From a national standpoint, we now have passed over 79 million cases, but we've only increased about 200,000 in the last week. So that's really good. And nationally, we've had over 254 million vaccinated with at least one dose. 81% of those 5 years or older have at least one dose, and 75% of the adults across the nation are fully vaccinated. So, that's really good. We still have people passing away with COVID, of course. So we've had, 966,000 deaths, 5,000 just in the last week of those people passing away with COVID. And in California, we've had 8.4 million positive cases, and we've dropped to just over 2,900 new cases a day now. So that's way down from, 6,000, 4,000 last week, 6,000 the week before, and 10, 20,000 and even more just a month ago. So and our case positivity is only 1.5%, which is good average over the 8 weeks. And so, but we still have people dying here in California. We had about 900 fatalities in the last week, people passing away with COVID. And then from a county standpoint, our county numbers we're now over 307,000 cases of COVID that we've had, but that's only 1,000 since last week, 1,000 new ones since last week, and that's down from 1,600 just a week ago. We've had another 22 deaths, so we're at 2,188 deaths with people with COVID. But vaccination, we're doing great with vaccinations. 94% of those 18 and over are fully vaccinated, and almost 69% of those that are eligible for the booster have already received it. So, it's good that we're doing well as far as being vaccinated and boosted in our county. We're the best county with over 1 million people in the nation. So happy about that, and I continue to spend time advocating for our city's behalf at the county level, talking to county health. The county health pop-up van was at the community center yesterday to test people that needed to get tested. And they're here normally on the first and third Thursday of the month. And then if from 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. So you can go to sccfreetest.org to sign up and get your appointment for getting tested. And they have, the county also has pickups of tests if you want to do that at home. And then, of course, if you still need, or someone needs to get their booster or get vaccinated, they can go to sccfreevax.org, and they can get their vaccination. Let's go ahead and talk about some upcoming events. Tomorrow is the Sunnyvale Bike Group is creating a crow ride, and so it'll be starting at Washington Park Swim Center at 5 p.m. So that's the parking lot at McKinley and Pastoria for those that are interested. We'll see if the rain holds off. We're supposed to have rain this weekend, and we need the rain, but we'll see what happens as far as celebrations are tomorrow. But I'm actually planning to attend, but we'll see how the weather holds up. If it's pouring, that will probably put a little bit of a damper on our crow event. And then as far as upcoming council meetings, we'll start with several orders a day next Tuesday on March 22nd. We'll have an Arbor Day, it's Arbor Day celebration, American Red Cross month, and it's also Women's History Month. So great to celebrate those. And then as far as the main meeting, we'll be looking at adding additional funding for Sunnyvale Community Services for a HUD decision that basically pulled some money back for Downtown Streets team, which does a lot of work within our community. We'll look at approving the location of cricket batting cages in Sunnyvale parks. And finally, we'll actually discuss in-person meetings and when council will conceivably come back in person. So it'll be interesting from that standpoint. We'll definitely have hybrid meetings, but a few councils around the county have come back in person. We've still stayed completely remote, but whatever we do will allow residents and city staff to join via Zoom. And I think that will be actually very positive as far as that's concerned. And then on April 5th, we have another council meeting. It'll start with a study session on grade separation. It's one of the things that has been on our plate now for a while, to talk about the grade separation at for the Caltrain tracks at Mary, as well as Sunnyvale Avenue. And so that should be an interesting discussion. And then we'll also be reviewing changes to our short-term rental ordinance to basically mainly in response to the shooting that happened at one of the Airbnb locations that had during a party at one of the locations last year. So this is kind of direction that council's given, and so it's finally that ordinance that's coming back so that we can basically codify some of those new restrictions, some of those new fines. Let's go ahead and get to our weekly questions. If you have a question, go ahead and add them to the chat. If you ever have a question, you can always email me at council@larryklein.com, and that's one of the best ways to give me, bring up questions here or just get a general response. I'm always happy to do that. This week, let's see, Chen asked, "Hi, Mayor Klein. Today, a 13-year-old kid was tragically killed in Mountain View on his way to school on Grant and El Camino. Sunnyvale roads are just as dangerous. We have high schoolers who cross Lawrence to get to Wilcox High School. We have elementary school kids who cross Wolf to get to Braley. Most importantly, we have the opportunity to take action to keep our kids safe. What are we doing to make sure this never happens in our city?" So yeah, I heard about that tragedy that happened yesterday, and it was so sad to hear, a truck and a bicyclist that didn't turn out well at all. And so, the city is actually doing a lot to create safer routes to schools around the city. We approved an active transportation plan about a year and a half ago. And part of that plan was to create safer routes to schools. And, we've already started some of those implementations. We had a lot of pushback from residents when we took out some bike lanes along Sunnyvale Avenue and took out some parking spots along Sunnyvale Avenue to create bike lanes. One of the things that one of the funding items that I was looking at and talking with the senator and the congressman on were some of those bike infrastructure projects. We put aside a certain money every year, and some of that is funding to get matching grants so that we can do more. From a federal omnibus project, they're funding some bike improvements in the Snail neighborhood. But definitely we're looking at things from the part of the state budget last year was, after advocacy, creating an Evelyn trail. So creating a separated trail along the Caltrain tracks on Evelyn where people can walk, people could bike and not have to interface with cars at all. So, we have a lot of those projects in the plan. It's how quickly you can update them, how quickly you can create them. We have the concept of protected bike lanes along Fremont Avenue that we've talked about. And we're looking at basically a buffered bike lane along Sunnyvale, Saratoga. So lots of different, things in the works. Definitely you can't implement them fast enough. And from a funding standpoint, it takes a lot of money to do that. And so it's like we basically set aside money every year from a budgetary standpoint and continue to do those efforts to actually implement those bike lanes. Monica asked, when will the Fair Oaks Bridge be completed? I have to drive by it every day, and I'm so ready for it to be done. I'm afraid it's been delayed. The restoration of Hendy Avenue and a lot of the bridge widening of Fair Oaks has been delayed for multiple things, and it's contractor delays. We still have some supply chain delays. There was nesting of migratory birds that we actually had to deal with, but one of the biggest things was scheduling conflicts with the Caltrain electrification project work, and so we actually had to delay that, as far as that affected kind of the project overall. But staff now anticipates that completion will happen in June of 2022. But to mitigate these delays, the city allowed increased hours of work, so kind of going longer in the day, and then also allowing some weekend work, which we weren't allowing initially. So all those, are things that the city can do to, try to speed the project along. I know that it's ultimately, people want it to be done, but at the end of the day, it'll create, bike lanes on both sides, as well as a new pedestrian path over the bridge, as opposed to the previous over Caltrain pedestrian area, which wasn't fully ADA compliant. They'd been built a long time ago, and some of the ramp angles were a little too high. So ultimately, what we're creating is something that's ADA compliant, and then better as far as bike lanes and traveling along that Fair Oaks Bridge. So June, I'm keeping our fingers crossed that things go smoothly, but I think after the previous delay, I think this is ultimately one of the positive things as far as that's concerned. Susan asked, I love the utility box mural project. When do the artists start? So the artists started last weekend, but most of them were doing primer, were basically taping up some of their boxes, and I've run by several of the utility boxes that are downtown that the artists have started working on. You should start depending on what the weather is this weekend, you should start seeing work done this weekend and probably the following weekend, with the rain planned, depending upon how much that actually takes place. Then we'll see whether or not people really get started, but it'll go on through the beginning of May. So you should have plenty of time to see that art in transition as it's actually taking shape. I think that'll be fantastic to see as we add, colorful designs to a lot of the utility boxes in the downtown area. Let's see. Betsy asked, I have concerns about the development proposal for the medical offices at the corner of Fremont and Mary. Multiple residents are worried about the privacy in their glass-walled Eichlers nearby. And so I did meet with the developer for that project and just a few weeks ago. And ultimately, and this was a village center that the city had basically said this would be a great place for retail and residential, so mixed use in these corners, so Fremont and Mary, Fremont and Sunnyvale, Saratoga. So there's several locations that we chose within the city. And what the developer is considering is tearing down the medical offices that are at the northeast corner and create, a new several-story tall medical building, as well as residential behind. And definitely they are considering the privacy. They're basically in the area facing the backyard. So the Eichlers, they would do 2-story buildings, and ultimately it would be about just over 100 different units for sale, as well as about 35,000 square feet of medical, offices, as well as actually a new public park along Fremont. So there will be additional outreach meetings later this year, but no date has been set as far as that's concerned. Barbara asked, will there be a citywide garage sale? Yes, it's been a few years since we've had one, mainly due to COVID, but staff is currently looking at a possible date. And as soon as I have that date, I'll be able to pass that on to you. Grace asked, why is the legislature proposing to give a $400 gas rebate to people who don't drive and to people who own electric cars? Yes, that is kind of an interesting sort of thing. They would be, it's looking at trying to deal with some of the gas tax. I do think it would make a lot more sense to just stop the gas tax for a period of time, so that then it's based upon how many people, how many drivers are there, all that. We'll see where the proposal goes as far as that's concerned. It's the state legislature, and it's easier for them to kind of redistribute money that they've collected, mainly because they collect the money. They also get tax. They not just get tax on the money, but they get interest on that money. And so it's better from a state coffer standpoint to collect the money and then redistribute it back to people who may or may not cash those checks. So there's all kinds of things that deal with. But yeah, there are the issues of, do you actually own a car? Do you have, are you being paid, are you hit by gas, or the gas bill? So there are lots of questions as far as that's concerned. I do think that just doing a moratorium for the tax itself would make a lot more sense, for a period of time, and that would immediately reduce that money. It looks better, especially with such a surplus in the state coffers, to say, oh, we gave money back to deal with this specific issue. So we'll see where that goes as far as that's concerned. Brooke asked, do we know any details about the bomb threat at Fremont High School yesterday? No, I'm afraid I don't have any additional information. Definitely it was a little scary for parents as the school basically sent the kids home. Public safety went through the building, found out that there were no bomb devices, and they are continuing that investigation. So it's an active investigation that's going on. Hopefully they'll find out who called in that bomb threat, and find out more information as far as that's concerned. But happy that everything turned out safely. Our students were safe, as well as public safety, the teachers, everyone was safe at the end of the day. Jesse asks, is there an update on any of the Fair Oaks Park completion? Yes, definitely. It's going to be opening sometime this spring. I've been told that it'll most likely be the beginning of May, end of April, beginning of May. They are getting close. The fields are starting to look really good. The Magical Bridge playground is pretty much complete, and I've been talking to the Magical Bridge team, and they're really happy about that as far as that's concerned. But ultimately, yeah, I don't have an actual date yet, but as we get closer, I'm sure it'll be good as far as that's concerned. And I think that is all my questions for this week. So let's go ahead and wrap up. Thanks for joining me again. Would continue part of daily life. People continue to see whether or not it's the place for 2 years, or with the full effect of not a job or so. I want all to know that no matter what challenges we face together, I'm proud of the city in our response to COVID. We all face challenges, and we've met challenges. Thankful, our residents who help serve the city in so many ways, come up, your action and your attitude really do make a Sunnyvale will from this as a community. We're in together. We'll get through together. One of the messages that I ended was generous and kind, and I think that holds true today. Thanks for listening. Wonderful week. Goodbye.